Today we are under the theme Breaking the Silence, Mental Health, Death and the Boy-Child. A theme I looked at much more of a nexus between these three interconnected critical issues. Tonight we are really shedding light on an issue that is often overlooked, but it's deeply impactful. Across our communities, the boy-child and young men are facing growing mental health challenges, often made worse by the heavy burden of financial pressure. Too often these struggles remain silent, hidden behind cultural expectations, stigma, as well as a lack for open dialogue. In Namibia, the boy-child is increasingly facing a silent crisis that is rooted in poverty, unemployment, and a shift in social structures or other social dynamics. Many boys are growing up in environments where traditional gender roles are pressurizing them to be providers, yet there is limited access to peer support, mentorship, and job opportunities. Of course, now leaving them disempowered and vulnerable. Our goal this evening is simple, but it's very vital. We are raising awareness, but we are also sharing practical strategies that are inspiring action that we can support our boys, brothers, our sons and young men in our societies to ensure that they live healthier and more hopeful lives. Thank you for taking time to be part of this very important conversation, dearest panelists, a conversation that is really timely, aiming to de-risk a critical demographic to the efforts of developing the land of the brave. My name is Joanna Ipangelwa, and I have the privilege to moderate this panel discussion this evening. My background really includes extensive experience in mental health advocacy, facilitating conversations that aim to bring communities together to unpack, dissect, and really look into finding strategies and targeted interventions to contribute to policy advocacy, as well as ensure that we see. We'll start with Comrade DC on my right. Please, you have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Good evening to the viewers. My name is Christine Haindaka, or Comrade Christine Haindaka, Deputy Secretary of the SWAPO Party Youth League since 2017 to 2022, and then 2022 I was re-elected in the same portfolio as the Deputy Secretary of the SWAPO Party Youth League, so which my terms, it's about to end in 2 years, let me say. It will end in 2027. And apart from that, I'm the Central Committee members of the SWAPO Party Youth League and its National Executive, and also I serve in the mother body structure as the Central Committee and National Leader assigned to Zambezi region. And apart from that, I'm also a student, social work at the University of Namibia, and coming from the health background, at the same time also a vice chairperson of the Youth Forum of Kavango West since 2018. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you so much. My brother Luciano, the floor is yours.
Yes, no, good evening, colleagues, fellow panelists. Good evening, our viewers. I'm Luciano Kambala. I'm the chairperson of the Nico Bessinger branch in Commerce region, under the SWAPO Party Youth League. I hold a bachelor's of accounting, honors in business management. I'm a master's student in the finance related modules. I have extensive experience in finance. I'm also an internal auditor currently at a micro lender. So I do see the realities of our young people in terms of the finances, how they are handling that.
Thank you very much. Dr. Shikongo, the floor is yours.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Arma Shikongo. I'm actually a lecturer at the University of Namibia. And yes, I'm here in my capacity as, I would say, an expert on mental health issues. This is my area of specialization, and it's also something that I've been obviously teaching at the university for quite a while. Yeah, I'm also very passionate about these issues because clearly when you create this kind of awareness, we are also actually starting the process of really destigmatizing, especially some of these topics around mental health issues. So I'm very privileged to be here, and I'm here to actually contribute to this particular program. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm happy to be here, yes.
It's a pleasure to have you on the platform. My brother Henrik on my far left. The floor is yours.
Good evening, viewers. My name is Heinrich Sanemechibolo. I'm just here as a mental health advocate since
In fact, very timely considering the skyrocketing suicidal rates that we have been seeing reported, and there is just those that are reported. What about the ones we have not heard about? So, Dr. Shikongo, my very first question really goes to you. I think as as somebody with an academic background, on a daily basis, can you please help us understand how this nexus is connected? How is debt, mental health, and the boy-child really coming together, and why does it then speak to this particular conversation as a crucial point of discussion?
Well, as I said earlier, I'm privileged to be here, and I would like to make myself available to make a good contribution to this very important, very relevant topic. First of all, when you talk about issues of mental health, we are talking about things that are really something that affects all of us. Whether you are male or female, we are all affected. And of course, as a society, we should always create this type of awareness so that we are able to help, especially when we are talking about targeted interventions. With regard to the topic specifically, of course, when you talk about issues of mental health, we are talking about things that affect us as human beings in terms of our thoughts, our mental state, maybe issues of masculinity, and then, of course, debt and financial issues. We know that there's also a cultural element as well, because when you talk about masculinity, we are talking about also expectations of how a male person is supposed to be functioning in society. Generally perceived or expected to be the provider, and of course, to make sure that you are always the one to make sure that you make a good contribution to your family, apart from yourself. Now, we also know that whenever we stay in a particular society, there are also other environmental factors that impact on our existence. For example, the socio-economic situations, they naturally impact on our mental state, on our social life, and all that. For me, the expectation that I generally put on a male sort of person, whether we call it a boy child, of course, when you talk about a boy child, I don't know whether a child is still working or the expectation on the boy child. But of course, I'm thinking about young people, young men, those of people who are really at a stage where they are expected to make a financial contribution, which I would think would be the reason why we would want to link financial stress on them. So for me, there are issues of tradition, expectations, especially cultural expectations that can also come through there. But I think the main issue here is that when we, as a society, are able to create supportive environment in terms of resources, infrastructure, we are also able to handle this, to contribute to managing these issues in a much more manageable way. So for me, linking this is also actually bring the economic dimension into the picture, the policies that obviously the government is also embarking on. So, but it's a very interesting topic because I believe that it brings a different aspect together. And I think when we actually put this together, we are able to also move in the direction in terms of policy that are able to really help men specifically manage better. So for me, I think that's how I can start off the topic. And I'm sure other people also, my fellow panel, would have something to contribute to the topic. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much. Now I'm hearing managing and I'm hearing economic dimension. So Luciano, coming from a very financial background, yourself as somebody who is now with a micro lender within a micro lending space, what are often those, basically the young men that perhaps you encounter on a daily basis, either coming to lend or doing whatever is happening there, and often you perhaps encounter them and realize that these people actually lack some money management skills, whether it's in terms of how they then come back and pay off with all the interest that come with lending money. So we really just want you to help us then understand how does this lack of money management skill lead then to this nexus, or how does it form part of this nexus of the financial aspect amongst the three?
Right. No, thank you so much for that question. I think looking at money management alone would be incorrect, because you need to understand that Namibia has a very high unemployment rate, and you now also have micro-lenders who have been given rights by NAMFISA to give money to unemployed youth or unemployed people without any checks and balances in place. But also you need to understand that currently we have about 5% of the less than 5% of the population of the workforce that earns above 35,000. Which means that a significant portion of our Namibian population cannot afford most of their daily needs. They can't afford their living costs, which is a lived reality not just in Namibia but across the globe because of a lot of shocks the economies have been experiencing. And we currently have about 8.1 billion, that was in Q4 of 2024, micro loans that have been given out, which means that there's 8.4 billion that Namibians owe to microlenders. That indicates to me that a lot of people are going out of their way to find money to be able to live basic lives for some, but others trying to live beyond what they can. But this also comes from, that indicates to me that a lot of people are going out of their way to basic life they can. Just from family under a lot of pressure, and this is also civil servants and in the private sector. You also have unnecessary pressure to live that is unrealistic. You have the blesser phenomenon, what is the right word to use? There's an expectation that the men must buy Moet, must buy champagne when we're in the clubs, for example. And we're young people, we go out to these places, and you're expected to provide for a standard that is beyond what you can afford. And you find that there's even young people who, and this is from some of the information I've seen, who earn even 60,000 per month, but they are deeply indebted because we are trying to live way beyond our means. But this also comes from a lack of understanding that just because you can afford to get a loan doesn't mean you should get one. Because it could mean that on paper, or your pay slip is saying you are earning 60,000 and you can afford it, but that doesn't take any expenditure, which could be 10,000 which you're sending to your mother every month. It's an expensive car that you've bought that you have to pay a high premium on. There's the house that you're staying in, and we are grateful for the SWAPO Party government that's now looking into interventions like the rent control bill. But currently in Windhoek, for example, a one-bedroom apartment in one of the affluent suburbs is around 6,000, which means that for me to get to the end of the month, if I don't find some credit somewhere, I might not be able to make it. And this is also not just people who go out of their way to find reasons to borrow money. There's also people who have circumstances beyond their control that get in with the first loan because my grandmother died and I needed to buy the coffin. I needed to get a loan for 10,000, which I already couldn't afford. But now, as I'm paying back, I realize that I have paid back this loan and I still need more money because I cannot afford to pay rent because I had to borrow 10,000 to bury my grandmother. So people get dragged into a cycle because of the financial situation that they are finding themselves in. Yeah, so it's a very nuanced situation.
Yeah. Wow, interesting. It's very interesting to hear from people or somebody that is in that space speak on the realities that I bet this is what you are seeing on the ground on a daily. So ladies and gentlemen, listen to the statistics. So in the financial year 2023 to 2024, we have recorded or we have reported cases that are over 542 of suicide rates in Namibia. Of this, 449 are men and 80 are women. It's drastic. These are often young adult males between the ages of 20 to 29 And in 2025, just between the 3 first months of the year, January to March, we have seen 124 rate of suicide, and of those, 108 were men. Namibia is ranked 4th in Africa with regards to suicide rates and 11th globally. This is deepening and sad realities of the country that we live in on a daily. And these are our brothers, these are our sons, these are our boyfriends, our husbands that are making up this large amounts of rates. So that really brings me to my next question, which is for Ms. Christine. And I would just want to implore that this is a woman that has been in the health sector, and she is still pursuing a career within that particular sector. We would want her to just help us understand what exactly does these rates mean, that we see that these rates continue going up, and it's often dominated by the male gender.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Let me start by saying, maybe if you can allow me first to define what's mental health and mental illness. So in my little knowledge and understanding what I know of mental health and mental health is somebody that's fit to do the work. And then mental ill is somebody who's unable to care for themselves. And it's worrisome that on a daily basis we see cases, especially from the young Namibians, our brothers, our husbands, our boyfriends, our nephews and nieces, that are, how should I put it now? It's a bit emotional, the topic. So on a daily basis, we are seeing cases, how we are losing life. Why? Because one is unable to care for themselves. 2, one does not have a proper support system from the family, because if you really have that support system, I don't think one can end up finding themselves in debt, unnecessary credits, unnecessary stress, and so on. But when you care for one another, this is a way of avoiding mental health and mental illnesses. So coming back to your question that you said, the statistic or the rate is going high on a daily basis. Maybe one might conclude to say that it's lack of awareness in the community. For instance, back at the region where I'm coming from, the Tukavango, so a man expected not to say much. For instance, when you're in an abusive relationship, so a man is supposed to kukuta, meaning you're supposed to keep it yourself. A man is supposed to be the family provider. So imagine, maybe you are all nurses or you are all teachers, but then the wife or the girlfriend expect more from this poor man. While all of you, your basic salary, maybe it's 18,000 or 20,000, and here comes the wife or here comes the girlfriend saying, I need an iPhone, I need a watch, a new watch, I need a TV, and so on. Now the poor young boy will be forced to go and buy things on credit, to open a furniture account. Maybe you might be forced even to go and rent in town instead of living to what you already have. So now back home, I think as women also, as a nation, we are failing to empower a boy child. Why am I saying that? Because if you look at the statistic, many of the victims, it's a boy child. Even if you look at the statistic of the graduation at all the university, being it at UNAM, IUM, Belvitia, and others, 85% it's women that are graduating. Now, if you look at the boy child, even in the psychology sector or social work sector, even the class where I'm coming from, maybe we only have 7 classes, because UNAM normally take 40 students per year to pursue social work. But out of 40 best students, you might find that maybe only 9 or 10 boy child in class, and 30 it's a girl child. And then after 4 years, due to some pressure and so on, out of 9 or 10 boys that are pursuing this degree in social work, there might only be 5, and these 5 might quit and do other fields. So as a nation, we really need to do more on a boy child, because I think we have done so much on a girl child, especially a platform where we expect policy maker or policy to be made So we also need a boy child on the table. Key position, we need also a boy child. Like, I'm very much happy to say that at least we have a first gentleman of the Republic of Namibia who is able to speak on behalf of a boy child. Because if you look at from the founding father, may his soul continue to rest in peace, there was a first lady. Then after that, our second president, and then first lady. The third president, the first lady. And then at least we are blessed as a country to have our fifth president, who is now, the husband is the first gentleman, who's able to speak on this particular area of a boy child. Maybe it might add value. For instance, me, Christina Indaka, I've been writing a lot of articles about how one should come out about, in mental health, gender-based violence, but if it's come from their agenda, maybe it might add value.
So what we are now saying is that we're actually trying to bring men in the conversation, which actually impacts them most because they are now making up the largest number in terms of statistics.
Maybe, Madam Moderator, before you take over, one good example that I can give you, in social work and psychology, we call it therapy. In a therapy session, so me being a female, me being a woman, my client might be a male, but there's some certain information that my client might not want to open up. But then talking to a fellow gender, it might make the two to establish their rapport more faster, so that the client can go into detail and share the whole scenario, what have happened, so that you as a therapist, you as a social worker, you can be able now to come up with amicable session that might address the needs and the wants of the client.
Okay, thank you so much, Comrade DS. You have touched on a very critical part of mental health, which is lack of either understanding, but also just the edge to go out and seek that therapy. So I would like to ask Heinrich, just to touch a little bit for us around stigma on mental health, especially for men, as it remains one of the key barriers to ensuring that we have people that have a behavior that allows them to go out and seek the necessary professional help. So can you tell us more about how, perhaps how to combat stigma, what stigma actually means for men, but also really the need for speaking up and seeking help?
So with stigma, I think it's still something that is a major problem in our society. It's just now that with the whole awareness and people talking about it, it's now coming a little bit that people are willing to open up. But then we still have people that are afraid of being judged now, because obviously I can't walk up to anybody and be like, I'm going through this, because now we looked at like, why would you be going through something like this? You are a man. So the whole thing of a guy being looked at of like, you are a man, you're supposed to do this, you are a man. At some point, it does hold back from opening up. But then, in most cases, I wouldn't really say people are ignorant, but then they just don't pay attention to the small details that one would come to them trying to, let me say, to open up. Because a person can come and be like, life is hard. And whoever is being told that, will be like, yeah, it is. So most people are afraid of speaking out or just opening up in general, because they don't have anybody that they can open up to. And so with the whole thing of the whole stigma thing now, it's that you would see that one doesn't really have anybody to talk to or just to be free around them. And it's an issue now that because the thoughts are there that this person is thinking a lot, thinking, but then obviously has nobody to open up to. And it makes it hard because in workplaces, in schools, you don't have anybody to communicate with, because you are looked at as this type of person according to your behaviors now. And with the fear of also being judged and all those things, it brings in a lot of problems to one, because now it's hard for one just to come out.
Totally agree with that sentiment. I think what I'm really now picking up here is that silence has become the only language that we now speak when we can no longer bear the pain. But really, we cannot workshop our way out of this crisis. And this is in the words of Minister Lovindao, and I quote, "Therefore, we are calling then for a community that should be impactful in the sense that we become more empathetic towards one another, and we work together, collaborating efforts to ensure that we destigmatize mental health. And just so we also feel free to speak to one another and have open conversations around this very crisis. Doctor, I think this is also bringing us to a much more policy level and targeted interventions, as we have mentioned earlier. And I really just want to hear from you that I see, from where I'm coming from, I see a very a much more needed sort of research-based oriented thinking, be it in government, be it in schools, be it just within communities, so that we sort of have evidence-based policies and interventions and make evidence-based contributions. So I would just want you to touch a little bit on what are those suggestions that you would have around this, and the perspective perhaps on the long-awaited finalization of the mental health bill, which we have now learned that it's in its final stages, but it has been very much outdated for quite a long time, and I think we cannot wait any longer.
Well, I always want to appreciate this kind of opportunities to provide some insight and understanding around some of these issues. We all know that also historically in Namibia, especially the field of psychology, specifically, which the social work has been very well known for some time in other fields, but psychology has got a very short history. So I happen to be one of the first psychology students actually in the history of Namibia when, of course, the university was established. Prior to that was the academy. So I happen to be one of the first two psychologists, people who have studied psychology. And in fact, I remember when I was doing the field, I studied psychology. There are a lot of questions around that because, we had never done it in school, so it's like, why are you doing psychology? So I had to do a lot of explanation. However, I'm glad to say that since that psychology department was established, we have had a lot of interest in the field. So we've been able to produce quite a few psychologists, especially psychological counselors recently. So one of the subjects that I've been teaching at the university, since 1995, studying Psychology 1 and of course other subjects. One of my most passionate subjects is community psychology. Now within that field, is where I want us to really actually borrow quite a lot and most probably implement here in Namibia. Because within the field of psychology, we don't only talk about clinical psychology where we are like waiting for problems to actually arise and then we intervene and manage them. There is also a very strong element of prevention. There's a very strong element of promotion of mental health. And one of them is this type of things that we are doing, what we call psychoeducation. Because when you talk about these issues, at the end of the day, you are creating awareness. But one of the things that I want to recommend really for the government to do, because is to establish what I call community mental health centers. Now, we already have different infrastructures. We have clinics, we have mental health institutions, which are also very limited. But most of these are clinical. What we need to do is to move into what I call a wellness prevention mode. And also how we are going to destigmatize is by making mental health services easily accessible. Now, the reason why there's a lot of stigma is because, for example, we only know that there's a mental health unit, say, at Central Hospital, maybe in Oshakati or at some other selected hospitals. And that is why people have this stigma, because people feel that only someone who is mentally disturbed, who is clinically disordered, can go to a mental institution. But the moment people actually start understanding that mental health issues are just like when you have a headache, you need to walk in and get treated. It will be a difficult issue for people to kill this stigmatization. So what I'm advocating is that even without necessarily creating new community mental health centers, we need to integrate, even in multi-purpose centers, a section where you have actually a mental health unit or a mental health office, so that people are able to understand that it's not that you need to wait to go crazy, as you would think, for you to go and seek mental health. Sometimes we also need to engage in behavior, lifestyle changes that would actually promote your mental health and also encourage you to always look after your mental health. You don't have to wait. So, and this we are talking about mental health, prevention programs. Now, when we link this obviously to issues of finance, we're also talking about financial literacy. We are talking about also promoting what I call a mentality of creating multiple sources of income. The main reason is because most of the time in our lives we are stuck on one source of income. If you have a job, somehow you feel you have arrived. And this is why you are only waiting for your salary, end of the month, and then another end of the month. In the meantime, there is nothing happening. So one of the things that we need to do, obviously, as a society, as a government, as individuals, is to develop a mentality of creating multiple sources of income. Because that way, you'll be able not only to have one source of income, because if there's nothing from here, then there's no way, except now to go to a market or a lender and then get into debt and stuff like that. So one of the things that we obviously need to encourage, which we have been doing as a society, is also to encourage entrepreneurship, because without having the mentality also doing and running a business, you'll forever want other people to actually give you, and that is why either you want to borrow from those who are working or borrow from institutions sometimes that are also very greedy in the way how they are running these things, because they want to make profit. If you look at the interest rates that they are giving you on a loan, you realize that they are actually going to make your life miserable. Ideally, you want to go and get a loan to make your life easy. But now, if you look at the interest, you realize that it becomes a problem. So, but to come back to the issue of policy and resource also allocation, I want to challenge the government to make sure that they also create a lot of community mental health centers. Just as we have clinics everywhere, just as we've got hospitals everywhere, create spaces where people can also look after their mental health. And the only way is obviously to make sure that those places, they have experts. UNAM, IUM, and other institutions are now producing a lot of mental health workers, whether social workers, whether psychiatrists, whether psychologists. Let them also have positions, create positions, do a budget on that as well. Because if we do not do these things, especially on the preventive side, we'll be using a lot of money on managing clinical problems. But if you invest in prevention, in promotion of mental health, you will have less problem, because now you are also investing in what you call wellness industry altogether so far. Meaning that, of course, now you are talking about lifestyle changes as well, creating financial literacy so that people are able to, as I said, understand how to use money and stuff like that, but also providing an environment that people can do business, and obviously also create multiple sources of income, because depending on one, it's always the problem. That's why you find most of the people, I can guarantee you, who are going to some of these places to go, especially to get loans, are salaried people. Okay? So, but we need, it's a mental health, it's also a mindset issue as well, you see. Because sometimes the reason why we want to spend beyond our means is because obviously of social comparisons and stuff like that, and expectations and culture. But at the end of the day, we also need to know how do we manage ourselves. Because, like he said, it doesn't mean if you can go out and get a loan, it's a permission or it's a license to go and get it. It should be the last resort, So, I don't know if I made sense there, but I guess that's what I can contribute on that one.
I think what I'm hearing a lot, some sort of multi-sectoral collaboration that
Yes,
needs
yes,
to take
definitely.
place, just for us to
Multi-dimensional.
ensure that we have
Yes,
to take
definitely.
place, just for us to
Multi-dimensional.
ensure that we are building communities that are responding efficiently to these needs. And I think one thing that I'm also really hearing is some sort of grassroots targeted interventions for us then to prevent the problems to escalate, and which is now just what we are addressing at the clinical level, but we aren't really creating awareness. Yeah, so really mental health is a very critical aspect of every other person's life. It's interdisciplinary and it's not discriminatory. Everybody is going through it. We see people that are lending money, it's people that have salaries. What more about those that don't have a stable income or even an income at all? So Luciano, can you please maybe just help us also understand how can men juggle this responsibility without really overstanding themselves with the potential to harming themselves at the end of the day?
All right. It would require quite a lot of education, a lot of literacy. And we are fortunate that we have institutions like the Financial Literacy Initiative that anybody can approach and request for financial literacy programs to be provided. Any employer can approach FLI and they'll come and give a targeted education lecture or whatever to employees, or any institution. FLI gives these services for free. It's a government institution that's giving financial literacy to help our people understand where they are going. But additionally, there's so many free resources. There's also interventions that are given by people like Woven, people like Christina Kawandama, I believe, who have YouTube channels, and they give interactions or interventions that are manageable by ordinary Namibian citizens. Because many a times, if you read online or if you read some of these books, they'll tell you, no, you must budget, you need to do what, but it's difficult to budget yourself out of debt. Because also you got there because you don't know that you can budget, or you don't know that you are able to manage your money in a certain way so that you can get somewhere. So the first thing I would say is seek financial literacy. Young people, young men need to go out there and find education on how to manage their finances, and also not overextend themselves to get to things that they can't handle. We also need to learn how to say no, because many a times we end up borrowing because Meme said she needs to give money for the wedding, or she needs to, but you can't afford it. And that's the reason why you're going to go to the micro lender or to go to the bank to seek for a loan to get money that you cannot afford. And we need to also understand interest rates. Understand that if I borrow from this institution, I will be charged an interest rate that is 30%. If I borrow from this institution, the interest rate is 15%. Yes, we can't live without borrowing. It's unfortunate, because the financial situation that most people find themselves in is one where you will have to get some money from somewhere for something. But the best thing is prevention is better than anything else. We need to try and prevent a situation where we need to borrow money. So trying to avoid borrowing as much as we can, unless it's very necessary, is one of the interventions that we can get. I would say let's learn how to budget and let's start saving. But it's very difficult to save also when you don't have enough money at the end of the month. So starting where we can, with a $10 or $50, if that's what you're able to do, and being very disciplined about it. But also, you would realize that some of our issues also stem from the psychologists and the social workers who would probably be able to understand it better. But it's a vicious cycle that because I'm in financial predicament, I am abusing alcohol, I am doing all these other things that are actually costing a lot of money. And they're taking more money out, and they're putting me into even more problems. So also managing those things, managing our vices that we are using to deal with our stresses, and seeking mental help or mental health support where we can. For those that find themselves already in debt, the first thing one would say is look at your debt and try to see which one of these debts is having the highest interest. which one of these debts is taking the most from me. Usually try and look at either look at the biggest one and try and manage that one, or start with the smallest debt. If you have 3 people that you owe money, or 3 institutions that you owe money, one is 20,000, the other is 2,000, the other one is 50,000. Try to pay off the 2,000, so that your deductions at the end of the month, that 200 you were paying every month to reduce the 2,000, it goes away, and then now you can start paying the 200 to the 50,000 debt that you have. So finding ways to manage that, but we do have resources. FLI, NAMFISA also has videos on their website, for example, to help lenders who have found themselves in a predicament to try and find a way out. But also when you find that you are overextended and you are overwhelmed, you can approach institutions like NAMFISA and say, listen, I have loans from Focus Finance, I have a loan from Letsejo, I have 3 loans from the bank, and I can't afford to pay back these loans right now. Are you able to help me get payment arrangements in place with these institutions that allow me to still be able to live a manageable life? And they can then look at how they can approach those institutions to try and get you some intervention. So there are interventions also with regulatory bodies like NAMFISA that you can use to try and get yourself out of some of this debt through a manageable way. Because yes, we also sometimes go to these institutions and they tell you, no, you can because you are earning a high salary or whatever, you can afford to borrow, you only needed 10,000. And then because they are selling a product, they'll tell you, no, but you can afford 50. And then you end up taking the 50, but you cannot afford it, and you don't even want the other 40,000, you only need 10. So I think managing our finances starts with understanding finance. So going to whatever extent we can to understand our finances, to understand the money that we are spending. Also looking at our spending. Review your spending. What are we spending money on every month? Sometimes really every day you are buying fast food, every day you are buying unnecessary things that you actually can live without. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Luciano. But just briefly, while you are still on that, you spoke a lot about understanding, and understanding is a concept that comes a long way. What are those perhaps measures or even calls to governments for us to integrate some sort of financial literacy at the very ground level already in schools perhaps, so that we don't have problems where even as a student, I just came to hear about now having a loan interest, NASFAF, all those issues. So how can we ensure that we integrate financial literacy at a very grassroots level already?
Okay. I think there are tools, or there are subjects already in high school or primary school even, that are teaching about the basics of finance. Maybe we speak to institutions like NANSO to try and lobby government to integrate more targeted educational instruments that deal with things like budgeting, deal with things like interest rates, repo rates, loans, etc., and healthy financial living. But also, and I think this might be my concluding if I'm not mistaken, we must understand that there are so many instruments, especially even now with the new bill that has been passed, the draft, the Consumer Credit Bill. Government is putting interventions in the law to protect borrowers and to protect ordinary citizens from overextending themselves, making sure affordability assessments are mandatory, ensuring regulatory oversight from NAMFISA and Bank of Namibia, prohibiting reckless spending, transparency in fees and interests, and cooling off periods for people who have overextended themselves. So there's those provisions in the new bill that will also protect consumers. So I think those interventions are also quite important. And once the consumer credit bill is passed, there are consumer protections that are in there that will also help our our ordinary people to survive this scourge of borrowing.
Thank you very much. My dearest Christine, just briefly, as we are getting to the end of this very important conversation, help us dissect without breaching confidentiality. And as a social worker, of course, we know what that means. Just point us to patterns and signs that perhaps we should be on the lookout for our loved ones when it comes to suicide, when it comes to mental health issues that they could be experiencing and they don't necessarily speak out or speak to anybody about.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Maybe before I touch on the privacy and confidentiality of the clients, let me say that the current Act of Mental Health 18 of 1973, it does not really address or fit the needs of our people. And I'm really happy that our Honorable Minister, Dr. Spranzo, have already tabled in Parliament so that they can review. So I'm calling upon all our lawmakers, all the 96 lawmakers being from our ruling party, obviously they will support, and then the opposition. So to make sure that they support this review of the Mental Health Act so that it can be able to address our current status, because as we speak, the current Act does not really speak on the ground or what is really transpiring on mental health. For instance, in Rundu, if you go to Rundu, it's just a small ward where they usually keep the clients that have found themselves with mental illness and so on. And also the care that have been given to this mental ill client, it's not the same care that they give to an ordinary patient. They are just kept like they're in a cell or in a custody. So if we can really have each and every health facility, being it at the district level, being it at the regional level, they just need to have a certain sector that's really addressing mental health. I think it might really reduce many cases of mental health. So coming to your question, Madam Moderator, so in social work or even in psychology, in every work environment, confidentiality and privacy, the right of clients, it's the one that governs confidentiality and privacy. The right of clients, it's the one that governs us as a person, as a helper, to make sure that whatever that the clients inform you in the therapy session, you should keep it. You can only disclose it if the client have given you that mandate to say, okay, maybe now you can inform my client, my partner, my family, and so on. Why? Because some client might not feel comfortable to share their personal dilemma, their personal history, what they are going through. For instance, a client came for HIV test, and the result is saying the client is HIV positive. And you know that the client is coming from a certain area, maybe you are from the same community. Now you're going to disclose somebody's HIV status. So it might put that person to be in a certain dilemma, not really dilemma, stigmatized at the household level. Because why? Family members, they will end up giving a certain attitude to that person because that person is HIV positive. Or the client is, for instance, maybe have cancer. You know, if a person that has chronic illness, it's different than somebody that's health. Because why? The mental status might not be the same. The person might think that, now I'm only here to survive for 6 months. Now I'm only here to survive for 3 months. For instance, if you go into medical term, a doctor does not have the right to inform the client that you only survive for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. They need to call in a social worker, they need to call in a psychologist to come and disclose the sensitive information to the client. And lastly, I would want to say that if you find yourself in a situation that really you can't speak to in an informed person, seek help through social workers, through psychologists, through counseling, even somebody that you trust that can be able to refer you where you can get professional help instead of taking your own life, instead of doing things that might even regret you. I thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you so much. My brother Henry, you are a young person, you have combated stigma, that's why you can sit here today. We are really, really grateful for that. I would just like you to share, or rather, if you could say one thing to somebody in our audience tonight that is struggling right now, what would you say?
So I've kind of have a lot to say, but I will say few. So it's more mostly for the young ones. We need to get comfortable to show ourselves what we are going through. You don't really have to to say much, but at some point you need to open up. You have a conversation with somebody who you know that, okay, whatever I'm going to say here, I'm comfortable with this person. They can hold it, or maybe they can also advise me on what to do next. The other thing also, we need, as young ones, keep ourselves busy. You know, mentally, do some activities on your free time, go jog, read a book, you know, just some few things that will keep you busy, rather than now you are going through things and you lock yourself in the room, you are just there contemplating on what to do, but then you are not really seeking help, or you're just there like, or having the thing of putting so much pressure on yourself that no, you are a man, you will find a way out. But what's the way out that you're gonna take though, if it's not just either seeking for help? Because now if you are sitting some, I don't know how to say it now, but they need to be more friendly or just better listeners to when a person comes to them like, you know, I was going through this, or not really the person comes that I was going through this, but just listen to what the person is trying to say. I think at some point you also get something out of that. Okay, this person is trying to go here, instead of now just telling them to man up, or it is how it is, and all that.
Let us be more empathetic, ladies and gentlemen. Doctor, as we close off, we would say you have seen, I think, more than what most of us in this room might have seen, of course, just by me looking at the demographic right now in the room. Can you maybe help us understand the difference? Do you think there is a generational difference with today's generation? Also because the demographic that is making up the highest suicide rates is that of young men and of course young people. Do you perhaps think that there is a generational difference in terms of how we are managing mental health as young people, but also from a perspective of an elder?
Yes, obviously there are always generational changes, especially also today there's a role of social media also that plays a big role. Because you see with social media, there's a high level of what you call social comparison. And there's a lot of showing off that is obviously being facilitated by social media. And obviously sometimes they're showing off sometimes not actually as real as it's out there. And in some cases, I think sort of leading this sort of fake life sometimes can obviously affect others as well, because with social media, you know, there's a lot of that you can do, even just to spice things up. You know, there's a lot of editing, and you know, sometimes with the social comparisons, we tend to want to imitate what other people are doing. In some cases, it's not actually as real as we think it is. So, and obviously that requires maturity to make this proper judgment. And the problem with social media today, it also kind of taking our minds away. We have become sort of mindless in sometimes, either the comments we make. For example, if you see, let's say something comes on online, and then people start commenting. If you look at some of the comments there, you can clearly see that some people are just so insensitive and so, you know, almost vicious in the way how sometimes they judge others and stuff like that. So, but I think what we need to also understand is that, yes, there are always this generational difference because of different factors. For example, as I'm giving the role of technology and social media, and obviously we are more exposed to more things than before, especially our generations. Even the role of globalization, because we now also know more even of other things that are happening in other parts of the world. So in some cases it's good because we can also learn from others, but it can also have a lot of negative effects in terms of social, cultural sort of lifestyle, negative influences. However, I think what we also need to, if we are to link now the issues that we're talking about, the issues of mental health, the issues of gender, in terms of masculinity, because sometimes the culture is obviously the issue of culture as well, and then the social economic aspect. as a society, obviously, once we also create a supportive environment, will enable people to become more resilient. You know, and of course, when we talk about these issues as openly as we are doing, it creates better awareness. It also creates thinking in terms of how to resolve the issues. And I think also with the government as caring as we have, I think we'll be able to manage some of these issues. But for me, I'm just hoping that, as I said, I look forward, especially the Ministry of Health needs to invest more into broadening the scope and bringing mental health service to the people. Just as we are talking about decentralization, we must make sure that obviously we invest in supporting those who are doing social sciences so that they are also able to get people who can look after our mental health and stuff like that. Because sometimes we tend to overemphasize also on technical science subjects. So if we can strike that balance, I'm sure we will be able to handle some of these issues, because these are things that are talking to us as human beings. We are not machines. So we need to also understand that you will need to have experts who need to be in these fields, and you need to invest, but also you need to decentralize the services. And for me, that's how we are going to fight some issues of like stigma, because now people will know about these issues without having any need to be ashamed about them. So, and I think that's how we are also going to reduce issues of stigma as well. So I hope a program like this also contribute to us opening up more, creating more awareness, and obviously challenging our government to invest more resources so that these things are actually decentralized. So for me, I think those are my remarks that I think.
Thank you so much, Doctor.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this very episode, which is episode 2, season 2 of the SWAPO Talks. This is an initiative by the SWAPO Party Youth League, a very much crucial initiative. This is what we call an initiative for the youth, by the youth. Really, I think from this conversation, we are drawing that the well-being of the boy child is not a side issue, and it is a national development imperative, and therefore us ignoring it is really just us risking losing an